Welcome to another program, Journey of Hope. Thrilling stories of people that have encountered medical challenges, medical crises, traumatic injury, and cancer. And these people have not only encountered, but they've overcome. They've experienced the healing ministry of Loma University Medical Center. And they've gone on to experience healing and hope and happiness and wholeness. Each one has a story to tell. Our guest here today is Gerald Slakoff, an amazing individual with a thrilling story to tell. 17 years ago, something began happening with his eyesight, and he experienced a detached retina that really changed his life forever. Sometime later, he heard the words that you have cancer, and made a determination of how he was going to treat that. But Jerry, it's good to have you on the program here. We've got people from all around the world watching. You're from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
That's correct.
That's where you are now. But you have a story, and you're from the East Coast. And I'd like to have you share a little bit about your childhood, where you came from, a little bit about your background to give us setting for our discussion here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And had a very unique childhood. I was born with the pleasure of having a deformed right foot.
When you were born?
When I was born.
Okay.
And the reason I say a pleasure is because it started to mold my life from day one. And years ago, in the mid-1930s, when you were born with a deformed foot, in this case it was what they called a club foot, they did not operate on it as they do today.
Really didn't know what to do at that point.
They really didn't know what to do. And the best orthopedics said, well, we'll put this child in a series of casts, and we'll change the position of the leg as he grows, it will straighten. So from the day I was born until approximately my 13th birthday, I was in a cast from my toe to my hip.
From that whole period of time?
And what they did is they used to put the cast on for 2 or 3 months, take it off for a period of 4 or 5 weeks, back into the cast. And this, my whole childhood.
The first 12, 13 years of your life.
Absolutely.
Oh, undoubtedly that was a molding, shaping event and experience in your life.
I had every size crutches from this big to full grown.
Oh, that's amazing.
And when something like that takes place, you learn a lot about yourself. And I was fortunate enough to have a woman who basically took care of me. She was a housekeeper, and her name was Ruth Kearse. And Ruth Kearse was an absolute beautiful woman. She was a magnificent gospel singer, and literally looked at me and took care of me as if there was nothing wrong.
As if
at all.
As though you were her own.
Not only her own, I was no different than anybody else running around town. And anytime I felt...
a gospel singer.
Oh, she was terrific. And she literally taught me how to manage the pain. And there was significant pain. Every time they changed the cast, they would just bend my leg to a point where the pain was excruciating. And of course, in those years, they didn't give painkillers to children. And they used to send me home, and I was totally miserable. And from the ages of 6 and 7 along to 8, she basically took me and said, let's play a game. And the game was to close your eyes and hum a pretty tune and guess when 5 minutes was up.
Really, that was the game.
That was the
In
game.
your imagination, begin humming a tune.
And my thing was to keep my eyes closed, hum the tune with her, and say, okay, Ruth, 5 minutes is up. Now, she had a beautiful voice, and of course, I would say, can't we sing? And no, we close your eyes and hum. And she was very stern, and she was terrific. And she would sit alongside of me, and we started, and first time we played this game, I said, okay, 5 minutes is up, and she would look at her watch, and she said, nope, it's only 3 minutes. Let's go again. And we did this time in and time out, week after week, and definitely every time I came home from the hospital with the new cast on. And it got to the point where when I would close my eyes and hum along with her, and it got to the point where I could keep my eyes closed and literally go into what I know now was a state of meditation for as long as an hour before I said
Amazing.
the 5 minutes is up.
Really?
And I was only a
And it's
child.
taking care of the pain.
There is one thing that I did notice even as a child. The pain was gone.
Amazing.
And I never mentioned the pain. And she would sit next to me, and every time, and I know I wasn't sleeping, because every time she went to move, I would grab her. And then we would just sit there. And of course, my mom, she was a very social lady, and she was busy out playing her bridge and canasta and whatever have you. And here I'm humming all these beautiful gospel tunes. And my parents and I'm born in the Jewish faith.
So, and you have a gospel singer,
And
and she's having you hymn gospel songs?
Absolutely. I sung more songs about Jesus than I have about Moses.
That's amazing.
And
That is great. What a story.
And that was my childhood. And having many experiences in and out of hospitals with casts that were taken off wrong and mess ups in the process, I always was taught that if you want something, do it. And the minute you start feeling sorry for yourself, you're going to defeat yourself. So that was basically the background.
So that came out of both your parents and this lady that was taking care of you.
That's correct.
Okay. Some people would call her something like an angel, you know.
She was definitely an angel.
Yeah.
There is a number of angels that have come through my life.
And have touched you and impacted you. Well, so you finished, you know, you're out of high school. What are you going to do for a livelihood?
Well, my father was in the meat business. He was in the business with his twin brother. As a matter of fact, that was the name of the business, Twin Brothers Meats in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
And I went to work there every day after school, and I used to go to work on crutches. And my job was to tend the bacon slicer. And I stood there and I packed up the bacon as it came off the slicer. Well, of course, when I finally got out of the cast, I continued to work there after school and developed a knowledge of a good trade. I was taught to cut meat by a German gentleman who went to work for my father who couldn't speak English. And nobody in the place wanted me to learn how to cut meat because they thought that their job would be in jeopardy. And
So nobody was going to share with you.
Nobody would share. And he made a bargain with me. If I taught him how to speak English, he would teach me how to cut meat. And that's how I learned the meat business. Well, I worked along the meat business until I was 19, going on 20. I got married for the first time at 20 years old. I can tell you right now that's not the thing to do. Of course,
Hindsight's so wonderful.
hindsight is just magnificent. But at any rate, I got married and I had a commitment, and things fell apart at the butcher shop. There was a...
That you're working at.
That's correct. I was working for my father and my uncle. My uncle was a dominant, he was the dominant twin.
Was he?
And he was also very, very jealous of me because I took an interest in the business. At that time, my father had four sons, and he had 3 daughters. So he was absolutely panicked that the sons would take over the business and the daughters would be left out. Well, my uncle was on a mission to get rid of this out of the sons. Well, my older brother, he had never had an interest in the business. My younger brother never had an interest in the business. I was the only one. Well, I only stayed around for that type of abuse
For a little while.
for a very short period of time. And I was married when I was 20, and I went into business for myself about 3 months after I was married.
And you ended up, as I remember you sharing the story, with a very successful business, and had that for a number of years. Then you got into surveying yachts.
Well, I had a very successful business. And my hobby was building boats. And I always had a boat. I bought my first boat when I was 13.
Really?
Oh, yeah, I was financially independent. I worked and had money. Anything I wanted, I went out and bought. At any rate, I really had a passion for the water, for boating. I built boats. I was friendly with a gentleman whose father was a terrific sportsman that had a boat, and I admired him. I admired this man, and he was just another angel in my life.
Kind of another role model.
Absolutely a role model who was not only a wonderful family man, a terrific sportsman, but everything had its priority. And I learned how to honor your woman and then take care of your family.
So
In that order.
Made a real impact upon you.
Absolutely.
Again. So then you got into the surveying business, and I want to really kind of bring down to the story here. 17 years ago, you discovered that something was wrong with your vision.
Well, I did get into the surveying business through it was an upheaval in my life. After 20 years, the marriage didn't work. Left the marriage. After left the marriage, moved to Florida. Met my present wife before I moved to Florida. And turned this hobby into a profession. Did an apprenticeship while I was still in the meat business for a surveyor in Philadelphia, and learned a little bit more, and constantly leaned toward going to work as a captain. I had a captain's license. I did everything around boats. I knew a lot about boats and had no idea whatsoever what a surveyor was until I met this friend of mine in Philadelphia, and he was a surveyor, and he knew I didn't care for the meat business as much as I worked at it. So at any rate, I started to do a little surveying in Philadelphia, and finally when the marriage was over, I said, we're moving to Florida, and we went to Florida. Went to Florida on a boat and lived on a boat, and started a surveying business only after the job that I was going to Florida to do fell apart. And that job was a captain. And I was going down to Florida with my present wife, Nancy. And she
With
was
plans
going
to be a captain.
I was going to be the captain. She was going to be the mate. And she said, I absolutely know nothing about a boat. I don't know what to do about it. And I said, you can read, can't you? I said, we'll learn. At any rate,
The door closed on the one thing and another one opened.
the door closed, and we went to Fort Lauderdale, and I had done some surveying. And we got to Fort Lauderdale, and I decided that we needed some fuel in the boat because we were just about out of money, and if we spent all our money on the on the dockage and didn't fill the boat up with fuel, we wouldn't be able to move it. And we were filling the boat up with fuel, and I met a gentleman filling his boat up, and the name of his boat was called the Surveyor. And I went over and very friendly, started to talk to him, and I told him that I had done some surveying work up in the Chesapeake Bay, and he looked at me and he says, do you have any of your surveys? And I said, yes, everything I own is on the boat. And to speed the story along, had an appointment with him that afternoon, and we went over, we rode over on our bicycles and showed him the survey work, and he looked at it and he says, well, he liked the content, but he used a different form. He wanted to know if I could change the form. And Nancy and I went back, and she was the secretary typist.
And reformatted
And
everything?
she reformatted it, and I asked him if it was okay if I used a few of his terms. And each surveyor has key terms that they use, and you recognize their work by their language. And something like that is if you were to have something that was not secure, it was loose. Well, you wouldn't say it was loose, or you wouldn't say it was not secure. You would say it is adrift.
Okay, so there's certain terms and terminologies.
So it was terminology that he used that gave it a specific flavor. Or if you were trying to explain, my hand is next to the bottle. No, my hand is in way of the bottle. So it was little terms like this that we did. We typed up the survey, went back, he read it, and he starts to laugh. And I wanted to know what I did wrong, and he said, you didn't do anything wrong. He says, because I swear that if I didn't know it, I thought I surveyed this boat.
Our time is really moving
Okay.
along, and we're going to need to
Fine.
move into your next the next area here, because I know and we're going to look at some pictures in just a
Okay.
minute. But 17 years ago, you began losing your vision.
It was
And
during a survey.
That was another turning point in your life.
It was during a survey. We had surveyed a boat down in Martinique, and we were both thought we would take the next day or two off and sit on the beach. And while sitting on the beach, I started to feel that there was something going wrong in my left eye, and went in to look at it in the mirror, and everything looked just perfect. But I did notice that I was losing my vision. It was almost as if somebody was taking a window shade and rolling it upward on my left eye. Obviously flew back to immediate attention for it. And I had a detached retina on my left eye.
Without a blow or any kind of an incident that usually precedes a detached retina.
That's correct. No, absolutely nothing. The only thing that I could attribute to is that we were on a beach, and it happened to be a nude beach. And there was a set of beautiful young twins about their 20s, and my wife says, that is what made you go blind.
There you go. The shade goes down. Anyway, this was a remarkable event in your life, and you realize that you may be losing your vision, you may be losing your eyesight. You went through a number of different surgeries, and I know that you began riding a bike.
Well, I rode the bike before I was
Did you?
I lost my vision.
Okay.
Yes. I started to ride the bike simply because
And we're talking about a motorbike.
talking about a motorcycle,
Right.
a very large
Right.
touring type motorcycle. And however, I wasn't riding that long before I started to have problems with my eyes.
Okay,
And-
let's take a look at a couple of the pictures
Yeah.
and tell us speak to the pictures here and tell us what we've got. The first one is, I believe, when you're traveling, and we're going to move through them rather quickly.
This is traveling through Colorado. That's Colorado National Monument. The first picture you saw was a friend of mine in front of me, and I took that picture just by holding the camera above the windshield while we were riding.
All right. And the next one is?
The next picture is my wife Nancy and myself, and that's in our backyard in Florida. And this is a boat that I was, a nice little boat that I was surveying, and I asked you to come along, and you thought it was some kind of yacht, and I said, no, it's a little boat.
It was a great experience, and I thought it was a huge ship, but it was just one of your smaller ones. The next one is
it's the same boat.
Picture
it's just
the same one.
It's just a little bit expanded.
And this next one is a little bit bigger boat.
Yes, and that's one of the boats that I surveyed, and after I surveyed it, the gentleman asked me if I would manage it. And I manage a few boats. At that time, I was managing approximately 4 boats.
And this is another picture?
This is another picture of that boat. It's in Lyford Key in the Bahamas.
And the next one is?
And that's also the large boat that I manage.
Okay. And I think we have one picture left here.
And that's just a repeat of one of the previous
Okay,
pictures.
Jerry, you know, you've had this remarkable experience of the eyes, and you begin writing, and you've ridden, what did you tell me, 350,000 miles, 375,000 miles in the last few years?
As of this year?
Yes.
From 1990 through this present, 575,000 miles.
575,000 miles, because you wanted to see the country while you could still see.
That's
well, a couple of years ago, you got the news that you had cancer. You had prostate cancer. And you went on a search and a journey, and you ended up coming here to Loma Linda. Tell us about your experience at that time at Loma Linda.
Well, my search basically started on the internet, and it led me to some testimonials, one of which I recognized that was written by a client of mine, a gentleman that I surveyed a boat for. And after speaking to him and speaking to some other people in the healthcare industry, I decided that proton beam therapy was the way I wanted to go. And it was totally against my urologist recommendation. And I just had focused on it, and I read enough about it and heard enough about it to satisfy my concerns.
So you ended up coming here then for treatment.
We came here for treatment, and the care that we received was marvelous.
You're here for how many weeks?
We were here for a total of 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
We came out immediately, and they weren't ready for us for 2 weeks, so we took a little tour around California. I have a brother that lives near San Francisco area, so we visited him, and we came back, and they were ready, and we started treatment probably in mid-February.
And how long ago are we talking about?
2005.
2005, so a couple of years ago. And how are you feeling now?
Marvelous.
Are you?
Yeah, I never felt bad.
You didn't feel bad before you came?
I didn't feel bad before I came. I thought that the doctor was a little bit goofy, telling me there was something wrong with me. And at any rate,
didn't feel anything before, didn't feel anything
no,
during, and haven't felt anything afterwards?
Absolutely. I had a marvelous experience.
Well, I need to remind the audience that we do have a wonderful group of urologists here. We have a department of urology, and we have a fine residence program here. We have different modalities, but you were led to come here, and I know that since you've been here, you've been very actively involved on the Proton Advisory. You've been an ambassador, and you know, there's a lot of men that are watching the program, Jerry, that don't have a clue as to what a PSA is. They can tell you different numbers that they are familiar with, but when you ask them about a PSA, so tell us very quickly, how do you find out what a PSA is?
Well, I didn't know what a PSA was either. And if I'm correct in saying, I can't even tell you what it.
Prostate-specific antigen.
Prostate-specific antigen. Thank you very much.
It's not a sophisticated test, is it?
Not at all. It's a blood test.
A simple blood test.
And what it does, it shows you if there's anything going on with your prostate.
And it's kind of a marker.
And it's a marker.
It's not definitive. We're really coming down to our end here. If you were to give some counsel to the people that are watching regarding their health, what would you tell them?
Well, definitely have your PSA tested on a yearly basis. If it starts to increase, investigate the reason why. Just don't say that, well, a certain number is okay. There's an old school of thought that if you were under a number of 4, everything was fine.
But that's been
And
really
that
drastically
is-
revised. And
That's the old school.
And a person really needs to take responsibility for their own health. You know, we're coming down to the end of our program, and Jerry, I know that as I've listened to your story and gotten acquainted with you over the years, you know, God has been guiding and directing and opening, closing doors for you, and you've thrown yourself into life, living it to the fullest every single day. And I know that God's got wonderful plans for you in the future. Thank you for being with us on this program. Those that are watching, God bless each one of you. God has a plan.